MinPrep, and welcome to our presentation on BSMD programs and how to apply. We're really excited that you're spending your evening here with us tonight, and we're going to answer a ton of questions about BSMD programs and kind of some tips and tricks of applying early. So first, I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'll have my counterpart introduce herself as well. But my name is Lindsay. I've been a college counselor with MinPrep for a few years now. I'm working mostly with BSMD students like yourselves. About 80% of our students here at MinPrep will be BSMD students. And so we spend a lot of time working with students just like yourself. And so one thing that we do is, work one-on-one and guide students throughout the entire college application process. And as you'll get from this webinar, also high school. And so we'll be helping younger students select the right classes for their major, help them narrow down their career interests to choose a major, finding a summer research opportunity or internship, shadowing experience, whatever it might be. And if you are a senior this year, we are guiding our seniors throughout the college application, so nothing is missed. We'll help them brainstorm the perfect college essays based on hundreds of effective ones that we've seen, where they're working nights, weekends, in every time zone, whenever it's convenient for the student. And we work with med school applications and grad school applicants too. And we have a focus on highly selective college applications and direct med programs, which is what we're going to talk a lot about tonight. And so before I get too far into it, I'll let Nidhi introduce herself and kind of tell you a little bit about her and her really specific skill set she's got.
Hi everyone, I'm Nidhi. I'm also a counselor in MinPrep alongside Lindsay, and I actually am a BSMD student myself, so I was really excited to host this webinar for you all. And yeah, I have been through the process that many of you are choosing to undertake not too long ago, and I've worked with countless students who have also been interested in pursuing the BSMD pathway. So through that, I've really enjoyed working to help students craft essays and choose extracurriculars that can best shape and serve their story well.
Yes, and so we have a lot of material kind of based for a lot of their younger students too, because hopefully our BSMD students have already started the application process, but we'll definitely cover some things that will be helpful for our older students as well. But let's jump right into everything. Oh, this is already done, but I'll let Nidhi introduce the BSMD programs.
So what are BSMD programs? This acronym is a term for direct medical programs, and these direct medical programs can also be known as BSMD, BAMD, BSDO, or BADO. And these are some of the most competitive programs in the college admissions process. And for each of these programs, an undergraduate institution partners with a medical school, which guarantees that a student can complete their undergraduate studies and then continue and matriculate into the partnered medical school. So for high school students who may already know that they are 100% committed to becoming a doctor, a direct medical program might really be the best choice. And students can get accepted into medical school at the very same time as they get accepted into their undergrad program, giving them a distinct advantage over their peers.
Yay, perfect. There you go. And so just so everyone knows, we did write a book on BSMD programs last year. You can get it for free if you have Kindle Unlimited. We just put out our second edition, and we have tons of insightful information, like our insights from this last application cycle, especially kind of addressing changes like the SAT subject test or the SAT essay and what that means for BSMD students, updates on more programs. It's got a list of all of the programs out there and a ton of information about seats, MCAT requirements, SAT, ACT requirements, and things like that, as well as like any DO programs too. And so you can get that on Amazon. We can send the link in the chat as well, and that'll be free on Kindle Unlimited, but you can also pay for it on Kindle or just buy a physical copy as well. So first, let's kind of discover or talk a little bit more about how competitive the BSMD programs are. And as Nidhi already kind of alluded to, they are one of the more competitive programs out there. And the guarantee of admittance into a medical school is what makes direct medical programs so attractive to students. And because of this, you can imagine there's just going to be a ton of applicants. There's no safety BSMD programs, and even the ones that are like easy to get into are still hard and require proper preparation. And so, a few of these examples, and one of the most well-known and competitive BSMD programs in the country is Brown's BSMD program. And so, for the 2019 to 2020 admission cycle, there were more than 2,600 applicants, but only 94 students were accepted to this program. So that means the acceptance rate was about 3.5. I believe last year they got 3,500 applicants. So you can see it went up significantly. The physician scientist program at RPI, kind of similar numbers of acceptance rates, a little bit easier though. 38 students were accepted out of 550 applicants. And then the Rice, Baylor programs, both of those are some of the more competitive programs out there. Only 6 lucky candidates for its BSMD programs were accepted each year. And so just to kind of put that into comparison numbers, Harvard is one of the more competitive, if not one of the most competitive undergrad universities to get into. And their acceptance rate always hovers around, 4.5% or so. And so a lot of times getting into a BSMD program can be harder than getting into the most selective universities in the country. And that's just because of the lower number of seats. And so these programs are just a few examples of the kind of intense competition you'll face if you want to gain a seat at a direct med program in the US. And so hopefully through advice in this webinar, you can beat the odds and jumpstart your journey to becoming a doctor, right out of high school.
So now let's talk about some of the advantages of BSMD programs. The main advantage that comes to mind for us is that with combined programs, students are accepted directly into the direct medical program, and they won't have to go through the long medical school application process. And that basically means that they are guaranteed a seat in the partnered medical school as long as they continue to meet the minimum academic and program requirements. This can relieve a ton of pressure during your undergraduate years and leave you so much room to just like explore and go outside your comfort zone and not have to worry about applying to medical schools. For the most part, direct medical programs will require you to maintain at least a 3.5 GPA during your undergraduate years. So if you're to apply to med schools, you will probably have to have much higher grades. For the 2019 to 2020 application cycle, for example, the mean non-science GPA was 3.72 for applicants to allopathic medical schools. And with medical school applications, you're held to a much higher standard, and your science-based classes and GPA need to be very well done, and they are very heavily scrutinized. And of course, being in a BSMD program does not mean that you can slack off by any means. If your grades slip, you are at risk of being kicked out of the program or placed on probation, but it does relieve a lot of stress. Another pro that comes to mind is the great academic freedom that comes with being in a BSMD. So once you've received your direct acceptance into a med school, you might feel like you have more academic freedom to study a greater variety of subject matter. The pressure of impressing the med school admissions offices with many full semesters of science-based courses has now been lifted. So especially within 8-year programs, you'll have ample time to explore your interests outside of the sciences, like in the humanities or in whatever discipline you choose. It is important to note that if you are in a 6 or 7-year BSMD program, this might not necessarily be the case because the material itself will be accelerated, so you will probably have limited free time to explore your outside interests. Additionally, with some BSMD programs, you may not be required to take the MCAT. The MCAT itself, most students spend about 250 to 300 hours studying for it. So they spread that time out of over 3 or 4 months and can study up to or more than 21 hours a week. And if you're in a BSMD program that does not require you to take the MCAT, this time-consuming and stressful process is something you don't have to go through. You also have access to unique opportunities. So with your status as a BSMD student, you'll probably get admission to special lectures, fellowships, developmental programs, clubs, or study abroad opportunities, and get really niche medical-focused experiences and activities more readily available to you than your pre-med peers. You'll also save a lot of time if you choose to do so. Some programs may let you finish your schooling in only 6 to 7 years, and you can become a practicing physician much faster, and you won't have to go through the lengthy medical school application process. That itself is a pro because the average student applies to about 17 different medical schools, so that takes a ton of effort, so you won't have to do that. And finally, financial incentives. BSMD programs can help you save money, especially if you are participating in an accelerated program. You'll also probably save about 5 to 10,000 during the process of applying to medical school, among other fees such as MCAT prep, paying for the MCAT, primary application fees, and secondary application fees and travel. Yeah, as you read through these advantages, you can start to see why programs are so competitive. So students love the security of knowing that they're in medical school without having to go through the stress and financial strain of having to apply after undergrad school.
Yeah. And so, of course, it's not just all easy and only advantages, no disadvantages. There are some downsides to applying to a direct med program, and so we'll kind of go through these just to make sure that you are 100% prepared. And honestly, that's what a lot of our work with students is, especially the ones we start with younger. It's just making sure that they are 100% certain that they want to go into the medical field and that they're going to be happy at the BSMD programs. So one thing that we do a lot, and that is in our second edition of our BSMD book, is we do a lot of interviews with BSMD program directors to make sure that we understand the program, understand kind of the benefits, and so that whenever we are advising students on which program might be a good fit for them and where they might excel, we can have this information there for them and figure out the right match, not just get into any BSMD program, but get into the right BSMD program. And so that can kind of sometimes help alleviate at least the first downside, which is hard to transfer medical school, because you are committing to spend 6 to 8 years at that specific undergrad, and then of course a specific medical school. And sometimes you might realize that the learning style, curriculum, or just the environment in general isn't right for you. And so some programs, if you want to apply out to a different medical school, you're losing your guaranteed spot. And so that's something that we just take into consideration when we're helping students and advising them on which program might be right for them. Another downside of BSMD programs is just the super long application process, because not only do you have to get accepted to the undergrad program, you also have to get accepted to the med school. And so that means university-specific essays and BSMD program-specific essays. It's a lot of essays. A lot of our students are writing, 50 to 80 essays, depending on how many programs they have. And not only is the essay writing process more intense, the interview process is a little bit more rigorous as well, because there will sometimes be an initial phone or Skype interview, and then sometimes there'll be an in-person interview. However, that was pre-COVID. It seems like it will be all virtual again this year. The interview process is just going to be a little bit more intensive. It might have the traditional interview process, kind of the tell me about yourself, why do you want to be a doctor. Other schools might follow like an MMI, multiple mini interview format, which kind of requires more specific preparation because it's more scenario-based, ethical questions and dilemmas and things like that. And in addition, just to add to the longevity of these programs, you won't find out if you're accepted till oftentimes March or April. I think I had a student find out like April 27th or something last year. little bit more stressful. And so that's definitely one of the downsides of these programs. Another disadvantage can be the grad requirements of the accelerated programs, and that especially if they are accelerated, if they're a 6 or 7 year program, especially our 6 year programs, oftentimes you don't receive your undergraduate diploma until your 4th year of studying, even if you've already progressed to medical school material. And that's because some of like the 1st year med school material will count for both undergrad and grad. And so that might be after you've already, if you do want to transfer, you'll have to wait until you get your diploma, and that might be after you've already finished 1 year of med school. You have to retake those classes. Therefore, it's no longer, to your advantage if it is. And if you do decide that medicine isn't right for you, even then it can be a little bit tricky to switch, especially if you wait kind of longer into the program, because you still might not have hit the graduation requirements of your undergraduate program yet. Another disadvantage is a lot of the times BSMD programs are paired with less competitive undergraduate universities. And for a high school student who is competitive enough to get into a direct med program, it likely means that they have what it takes to get into medical school if they kind of continue on the path that they're at. So these students, historically will tend to be hard workers, passionate about medicine, and good test takers. And the problem is that a lot of these BSMD programs might be at universities that are considered safety schools for such high achieving students. And so in that case, the student will want to ensure that they do graduate from the BSMD program. Otherwise, they'll be attending an undergraduate institution that maybe wouldn't have been their top choice if it hadn't been for the BSMD component. And another disadvantage is, just as we talked about, it's hard to get hard to get accepted. They're so competitive. A lot of programs have 5 seats, 10 seats, 20 seats. I mean, Brown has a little bit more with 80 or 90 seats, whatever it is. And so you really do have to be the best of the best to get accepted to a top program. And as Nidhi is going to talk about at length, building up this strong candidate profile can take, if not months, years to do, and it should not really be taken lightly.
So now I'm going to talk you through our timeline that we put together to speak to how you can build up your academic and extracurricular profile to get accepted into a competitive BSMD program. It'll definitely take more than a couple months to convey your desire to become a doctor and gather all these necessary working parts of your application. This is definitely not a strict and flexible timeline that you must follow. Your journey to becoming a doctor to medicine is unique, but using this timeline can help you guide and support you on your journey. And of course, it is okay if you start the process a little later than other people. So let's get started. Yeah, freshman year, this is definitely your first year of high school. Take a challenging course load. The summer before freshman year, I would recommend that students brush up a little bit on academic writing, and if there are any courses that you can get out of the way, prerequisites like PE, or some schools have a health or an ethics elective. If there's anything that you need to get out of the way, that's a great time to get your feet wet into the world of high school courses and just get those electives out of the way so that you have more space later. But yeah, take a challenging course load. Don't let your grades drop. If your school has AP classes or pathways to AP, take advanced math and science classes. You also should use your summer wisely. Try to find a volunteer position in a hospital. A early level of research position would also be great at this point, or a position with some sort of organization, or medical volunteering within like a hospital, clinic, or nursing home. And then on to sophomore year. So during your sophomore year, you can continue to take advantage of the courses offered by your school. We've gotten rid of the SAT subject test, so APs will really be your main focus. Try not to overburden yourself with APs, but you definitely want to start getting your feet wet with advanced classes and APs that you can handle and do well, especially in the science fields. Here, you also want to narrow your focus down onto a few select extracurricular activities. You probably signed up for a lot in freshman year, so don't feel obligated to continue them all, but really ruminate on how you can be deeply involved in a few activities to the point of leadership. During the summer before your junior year, so summer after sophomore year, try to seek out some research opportunities at a university lab. Starting now, you can really brush up your research skills and spend at least a couple summers in the lab or in a longitudinal shadowing and research mentorship, or medical volunteering mentorship, which can really help you gain those long-lasting relationships with professors or mentors and learn how to properly conduct research or be around a medical environment. Here, you should also start shadowing physicians and build up your clinical and research repertoire. During your junior year, as you know, your junior year is your last full year before you apply to colleges. So if there are any missing pieces of your application, this is the time to get it all in order. So take challenging courses, make sure you focus your energy on getting good grades. During your summer, spend more time doing research with the ultimate goal of being able to maybe present or publish your findings. If you can't find a research experience in the lab, maybe apply to some summer camps dedicated to STEM or research or pre-doctoral, pre-medical studies. A lot of camps have late winter deadlines, so this is something you definitely want to get on top of quickly because you don't want to miss opportunities just because you weren't paying attention to deadlines. Continue your medical volunteering and shadowing. Maybe bring it down to a few hours a week, but make sure you just still go through with that to show that longitudinal connection. And yeah, the summer before senior year, you need to prepare your college list and do your research to various BSMD programs to make sure that you've met all the requirements and you can hit the ground running when applications open. If you want to get a head start, you can also work on your personal statement during the summer. So the Common App always releases the personal statement prompts the summer before, and many of them do not change from year to year. So by completing that 650-word essay, that's a huge chunk that's done, and you can just mainly concentrate on the supplementals. And finally, you can use your summer to visit colleges and or watch virtual videos or do some research about campus life to get a better feel for what would be a good fit. And finally, your senior year. So this is crunch time. Time to show your strong commitment to being a doctor. Also, BSMD applications can be really time consuming. You'll probably be writing maybe even upwards of 45 plus essays, and your teachers are not going to give you a break just because you've chosen this application path for yourself. For example, we always reference the fact that the PLEMI had 7 supplemental essays. So while you might be able to read some content, you'll still spend a ton of time writing your essays. So you don't want to start in January of senior year or very late because you'll also have interviews coming up. So application decisions also will likely not come out until March, and then you will have until May to make your decision. So really make sure that you get those applications in on time. Yeah, this is just a sample timeline. So every student needs to find their own way, but this does provide some good ideas to get those very important experiences such as shadowing, volunteering, or research, and when to fit those in. So as long as you take care to be a well-rounded person and gain various diverse experiences that can show your unique desire to become a doctor, you'll give yourself the very best chance to gain a seat in a competitive BSMD program.
Yeah, that is a lot. And I think the good thing too, and something that we always stress to like our new parents as well, and students in general, is that there's no one right timeline, no one right pathway to BSMD program. So for academics, for extracurriculars, there's no formula that you follow because every student's going to be super different. And so that's something that, we really stress because we don't want every student to look the same when they leave us. They should be different. They should have their own interests. And so we spend a lot of time cultivating those passions and interests with our students. And same thing is true about academic profiles. Every student doesn't need to take the exact same classes or anything like that, because a high GPA is really not the only thing that matters when applying to BSMD programs. And so, of course, it is important. And course rigor, course selection, and class rank, if your high school still ranks their students, and standardized test scores, those are all carefully considered before a student is admitted to the program. And so, they do want to make sure that you are taking advantages of the opportunities your school offers. And so you can do that in a variety of different ways. And the first thing is targeting your class schedule to include as many science classes as possible, as well as, taking advantage of the AP or honors courses like bio, physics, and chemistry. You want to really show that you can excel and be great at science classes. However, you don't want or need to take every single class that's an AP or honors. This won't help improve your resume. Instead, take a few AP courses and focus on the ones that are related to your intended field of science. And so I always use AP US History as an example. It's time consuming. There's a lot of memorization, a lot of reading that goes into it. And if history just isn't your thing, that's okay. In fact, maybe it'd be better spent rather than spending 5-6 hours a week studying for AP US History. You do a research project or you're volunteering or whatever it might be, better spending that time somewhere else where somewhere you're actually passionate about. And so it's better to concentrate on getting the best scores on your AP classes that you are taking and in the class. So concentrate your energy. And the last thing is, avoid grade inflation. The admission officers know what you're doing and aren't really fooled by an overly high GPA that lacks difficult science and math courses. They do care about what type of classes you took than having the highest GPA possible. And so by having more focused classes on science, you can become a stronger student academically. You won't be too overwhelmed with classes that don't relate to your upcoming major and can concentrate on building up other aspects of your application, like your extracurricular interests. But that being said, if you're really into AP or history, even if it is time consuming, go for it. If history is your thing and you love US history, go for it. There's no reason not to take these higher level AP classes just because you don't think it will look good. The things that you're unique and that you're pursuing are how you're going to stand out. And so it's totally fine if you're taking kind of classes that aren't STEM, if it's something that you're passionate about. Now, students that do get accepted to BSMD programs tend to have a higher GPA. It's not necessarily a deal breaker if your GPA is on the lower side. Most programs do have a baseline score or a baseline GPA requirement of 3.5, but some of them will be a little bit lower, and UMKC is a good example. Their lowest minimum unweighted GPA requirement is 3.0. However, you likely will need a much higher GPA to be considered for the program, and for UMKC's program, on average, their unweighted GPA of their students accepted is 3.8. So even if the requirement's lower, it doesn't necessarily mean don't apply if you have a lower GPA, but just know, the average is a little bit higher. But just remember, grades aren't everything. SAT, ACT scores aren't everything. The college admissions process is holistic, and every aspect of your application is considered. And that's something that in the interviews we've done with these program directors, we've talked to them at length about is, what matters in this application process. What are they really looking for? And a lot of the times, SAT and GPA are how they're filtering out the students. But once, you've met their thresholds, you're in the room to be considered. And that's where your resume, your essays, and your, when it comes to it later, the interview really come into play.
So after a BSMD program evaluates their applicants and the student has passed the GPA and standardized test score requirements, the next thing that admissions officers usually evaluate is the extracurricular activity list. So So on the slide, we have a few of the major topics within extracurricular activities that we're going to touch upon very briefly. First, specialist versus generalist. So when a BSMD program is evaluating applicants and they see a student who has done like 10 plus activities, that sometimes stands out as a red flag for them because they would rather that students spend time concentrating on a specific set of activities and doing them well rather than being a jack of all trades, master of none. Um, you do have to juggle a lot of interests in high school. Parents and teachers might have told you that it's great to be well-rounded, but it's best to focus on certain activities and prioritize math and science related activities, as well as certain specific limited opportunities that you can really excel in. And colleges look at a variety of different aspects, from leadership to sports skills to musical talents, to regional or national awards when looking for when looking through someone's extracurriculars. So additionally, like within the wow factor, you should try and pass the wow test. So what makes your activity stand out? If you were to tell someone about the activity and how you're involved with it and make them say wow. So some examples of this. So we had a student who loved to skateboard, and he even started a club to teach neighborhood kids how to skateboard and ran a summer camp for low-income children. He expanded this to start a nonprofit that donates skateboards to underprivileged students. So that's one way of taking something that you're already passionate about and then moving it a little further. And then another student we had spent summers volunteering in underserved clinics and noticed that certain tools were being thrown away in the US that were lacking in these clinics. So he built a nonprofit that formed a partnership between the two. There are definitely ways that you can also work to get research, shadowing, and medical volunteering on your resume, because these are really strong scientific and medically relevant activities that would be a green flag to any PSMD admissions team. So everything from science fairs to summer research camps to organized programs such as like MIT or Clark Scholars Program at Texas Tech University. These are all great opportunities to get into research and work on a mentored research project that potentially could lead to publication. For shadowing, direct medical admissions officers do want to see that you've experienced the workplace of a doctor. So some of the ways that this can go about is to reach out to certain doctors within your university system, or even start with your primary care provider and just learn about the job they do and ask to see if you can shadow them. And definitely start within your own network here. Sometimes a mentorship where you can combine research and shadowing would be the best way to combine and kind of knock off two of these with one experience. And finally, volunteering. So long-term commitment to volunteering is super important rather than doing one or two events during the school year. So try to volunteer for a few hours a week. And whether this is virtual volunteering or in person, I know that we are still in a pandemic. So some of the ways to kind of work around this are to like maybe reach out to nonprofits or community-based organizations to see if they may need help with the web side of things, such as social media or marketing. Yeah.
Cool. Those are all good advice. And as we mentioned before, but it's something that I think is worth mentioning again, no right or wrong way. If it's something that you're passionate about, which is kind of like the last thing too, the passion projects, whatever it might be, it doesn't have to be super med focused. It can be something that's not med focused at all. And so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Nidhi. Do you mind telling us a little bit about like what your background is as like a successful BSMD applicant? What kind of extracurriculars were you involved in high school that kind of helped you stand out throughout the crowd?
Absolutely. So I think, I know I mentioned that I was a BSMD student, but I should probably mention which one. So I'm a student in the Brown PLME. I'm a graduate of Brown, and I'm currently in a gap year before going back to the medical portion. So I think one of the things that really helped my case was that I did have a well-rounded set of activities, but I also had a lot of depth in the science fields, and I could tie in many of my extracurriculars directly with why I wanted to go into medicine or a certain niche within medicine. That's also really important, like finding an area of medicine maybe to show a pattern in, to show that you're not just surface level trying to become a doctor, but maybe you'll use that degree to do something further. Definitely a pattern I've noticed. So, to answer your question about activities that I did, so I started an organization in high school for environmental health and youth-led advocacy around issues of environmental sustainability and sanitation in developing countries. So we hosted events in the US and in India to empower young people to take more active stances in their communities. Outside of that, that was one of my main extracurriculars for sure. I was very involved in Latin because that was a separate passion of mine. So I did junior classical league, the whole 9 yards of like everything you could involve in with Latin. I also started a first responder training program for my school, which I was really involved in. I'm from Missouri, where you couldn't get EMT trained until you were, I think, 16 or 18. The age limit was very high, but you could get Federal Emergency Management Agency certified to be a first responder. So I got trained and then brought that training to my school and also volunteered a bunch through there. And yeah, like among other things like test scores and AP classes and some other extracurriculars, I feel like these three things really stood out to help my case and bring me beyond that of a typical applicant.
And did you do any like physician shadowing throughout your journey?
So I personally did not shadow, but I did have a mentored research experience with a physician scientist. So I felt like that was kind of my mentorship experience where I worked under a physician and got to hear about that experience. I also volunteered in a pediatric ward for all 4 years of high school. So I think between the two, I felt that I had a lot of relevant medical experience that I could speak to. Would recommend shadowing because I feel like I did miss out on a little bit of it. Definitely not super traditional for people to never have shadowed and go through this path, but I do think that medical experience is the real key to this rather than like just checking boxes. So I've shadowed, I've done this, this, and this.
Yeah, that's such a good point too. And it kind of goes to show too that you maybe weren't had the traditional, what you think you would need applicant, and you get into the BSMD program out there. So hopefully that does calm some nerves of some younger parents, just knowing that there is no one right path.
Right.
I cannot stress that enough. There is no one right path. No matter what you end up doing, whatever you're kind of passionate about, it's always pretty obvious too that like that's what people like to do and what they want to do. And so that's one thing that we always stress and will continue to stress: passion, finding what you're interested in, what you want to do. Because why waste 4 years doing something you don't care about?
Mm-hmm.
So That's definitely a big piece of advice. So that was really helpful. And if anyone has any specific questions about Brown or the PLEMI program or, about her BSMD journey, feel free to send them in the chat as well. And by we, I mean Nidhi, would be more than happy to answer them.
Yes, of course.
Cool, but while people are maybe thinking of some, let's move on to kind of the differences between BSMD applications and traditional applications. And as we kind of have mentioned some of these, I'll just kind of skim through this. The big difference, I think, is the number of applications. And honestly, this number, 17 applications for BSMD, is maybe a little bit more now. A lot of students are applying to more and more. As we talked about with Brown, what was it, 2,600 2 years ago, 3,500 last year. Case is kind of a similar story. They had 2,300 applicants 2 years ago, 2,800 applicants. It's getting more and more competitive, and so students are sending in more and more applications just because there's so few seats. You want to get the best chance possible. And so we'll guide our students throughout that whole process of making sure to have a balanced BSMD and traditional list. And one thing that, we really want to stress is you can have as you kind of saw, some non-medical focused things that do tie into what she wants with her future. And so that would be one thing that we would definitely want to talk about. And so even in coronavirus era, a lot of these steps still apply. The COVID is not really a good excuse to not do anything. Obviously, Nidhi is her application, I guess, was pre-COVID. And so, her resume will look a lot different from students applying this year, and that's okay. It's important to kind of keep evolving with the times. And so if things are virtual, that's okay. So for example, we had a call with a medical school, Kaiser Permanente, and kind of asked them directly, how are you guys viewing virtual shadowing right now? Because it's impossible for especially high school kids to get into a doctor's office and things like that. And so they said that, the AMCAS, the MD organization who's kind of reviewing the applications, said that they have to consider virtual shadowing right now because it's just impossible. And so that's something that is totally a valid way to get experience. It's obviously not going to be as good as in-person shadowing, but it's a pandemic, so there's nothing else you can really do, and that's okay. And so a lot of activities have had to evolve maybe to be more virtual. Instead of maybe working in a lab, you're doing an independent research project. Instead of volunteering at a hospital, you're doing, I had one student that I'm working with right now who started a letter writing campaign. And her goal was to write, I think, 2,000 letters to healthcare workers and to patients and things like that to make them feel not alone and, still supported whenever they couldn't have visitors and things like that. So, there's definitely different ways you can evolve with your activities to make sure that you are kind of finding a way to get to where you want to go and still showcasing that you have a strong application. All right, so I see we do have one question, and I'll let Nidhi handle this one.
Sure. So the question is, can I ask how you got shadowing opportunities? So I did not get any concrete, solo, just shadowing opportunities. But for my medical volunteering, there was a program through my local hospital. I think many hospitals will have similar programs. So I just applied to that program, went through the basic hospital mandatory training, and then I was cleared to work in a pediatric ward. So that was my how I got my medical volunteering experience. For research, I feel like my research experience throughout high school was honestly very sporadic. So I got a very entry-level research opportunity under a physiology professor after my freshman year. Did a summer camp after sophomore year, one of those 2 weeks, 2-week camps at a university. I did Wash U's summer pre-college and got to interact with some physicians there and get an idea for how to do research. And then I kind of parlayed these experiences into my junior post experience where I actually worked in a lab of a physician scientist on a project researching multiple myeloma, and that was part of an organized research program.
Yeah, and if you're not as lucky as Nidhi and don't have access or feel like you can't get those types of opportunities, um, the first step for like shadowing too could just be reaching out to your like general physician, your pediatrician, whatever it might be. Email them and ask. A lot of times they're willing. But as we mentioned, pandemic era, a lot of kids are not allowed to go into them. And so if it's virtual, that's okay. We can put some names of some places, like web shadowers is one that I always say. Is it just called virtual shadowing? Do you know if the other one?
Yeah, I think it's just like virtual shadowing or something.
Wow.
Or yeah, and honestly, if you Google or look up very specifically like virtual shadowing in like X, Y, and Z specialty, you will definitely get lots of insightful videos and opportunities to follow doctors virtually.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Especially looking up the specific specialties too. That's always a really good idea. And then you can decide, do I want to, whenever possibly the pandemic is a little bit more gone, do I want to, shadow that person in person, and can kind of help you make some choices there. Okay. Well, we can keep on going. We have a couple more slides, and if anyone else has any questions. Oh, we got a good one.
Oh, I'm assuming guest speaker means me.
Yep, she's a girl for too, though.
Yeah. I'm also a counselor, so I'm not just a guest speaker. But, the question is, among GPA, SAT, and extracurricular components, which component did you feel help you the most with being admitted? Honestly, I think, well, like my GPA and SAT, so I did not have a 4.0 or a perfect score on either the SAT or ACT. My scores were pretty uniform, so I got a 2320 on the old SAT and a 35 on the ACT, which are like very competitive scores for sure, but like by no means like the perfect score. I think my extracurriculars and my essays really stood out. I took a lot of liberties in my essays. I mean, I've talked about my extracurriculars a ton, so like I had a lot of unique experiences that like allowed me to write, allowed me to show my love for both the humanities and STEM fields, and also kind of delve into specific areas of medicine. But I also felt like my essays were super authentic. I took some risks. I definitely dug deep to find those experiences that best encapsulated who I was, and I spent a lot of time like bouncing off ideas, like just casually, like with my parents or with just myself, really trying to figure out like what I wanted the admissions office to know about me. So I think among everything, extracurriculars and essays, which is why I know the value of not undervaluing your essays in this process, because they really can make or break an application.
Yeah, because if you think about it too, how many applicants have, if not a 3 or a 4.0, close to it, if it's like a 3.8 or above, so like a good competitive GPA, or a 1500 or above on the SAT, how do you really tell those kids apart? It's going to be the extracurriculars, it's going to be the essays. And so that's whenever we did our interview with a couple of the program directors, those are things that they specifically mentioned. That's how you stand out. That's who they remember. And so a lot of the times too, when you get to that stage, like the essays serve the purpose of showcasing like what type of person you would be on campus. They can envision who you might be. And so that's, a lot of how the extracurriculars can help with that story too.
Yeah, for sure. And Well, I'm sure this is like a topic for like a different webinar that you've done, that we've done at other times, but your essays are really the only opportunities that people have to see the real you. Like everything else is kind of very regimented in that like you write exactly like what you did, and there's not very much room to show like what all these experiences mean to you, and your essays are kind of like that golden ticket to just bring everything together, sum everything up, and like show what all your experiences have meant to you. So definitely spend time on those and make sure that you are happy with those and how they turn out.
Yeah. So starting early. Starting early is so key. It's stressful if you start, like, for example, first deadlines, not all the deadlines, but first deadlines will be November 1st. So if you're starting this process now, you don't have kind of time to grow and to have your application, your essays to evolve, kind of what Nidhi was saying. So start early. But actually a good transition into Natasha's question about, is it too late? And it's definitely not too late to start preparing in freshman year. I had a girl last year who like was super computer science and then switched. And so how she kind of phrased her why doctor essay or why medicine essay was like, here's what I did and here's how it will actually help me become a better physician. And so she kind of talked about the problem solving with computer science, working with her hands and building the robots or robotics and, whatever it was, and how that would help her on her road to being a physician. And so I'm assuming the first 2 years of your life, you weren't doing nothing, or not first 2 years of your life, first 2 years of your high school career, you weren't doing nothing. You were probably still doing clubs and things like that. You were still showcasing maybe leadership or passion or whatever it might be. So ultimately, if you start junior year now, I don't think it's too late at all.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree more. But going off of that as well, the medical field is so wide and diverse, and so many things can be tied in. So full disclosure, like I thought I just went back and forth between law and medicine for the longest time, and I think it was only my junior year when I really cemented was like medicine is what I want to do. So a lot of the activities I'd done for sure could be spun in a health way, but they could also have been spun in like many different ways if you catch my drift. So a lot of my work, like say on the school newspaper or on uh, the Latin conventions, and like with those activities, I had originally intended them to kind of be used towards my interest in law, but it turned out that they were really able to help supplement my application for medicine. So yeah, definitely use what you have, spin it in your unique light, and I'm sure that there'll be some way that it will enrich your application despite not having the same path set out from day one.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree. Yeah, we've definitely had kids come to us senior year, and they didn't really have any hospital volunteering. They didn't have much shadowing. They didn't have much med focused things. And we kind of, for like this one kid's case who ended up getting into direct med program, he was like a karate instructor, and so we kind of talked about how he loved to help people and how he loved to be a teacher, because kind of how what he said what appealed to him as a physician was like he would be a teacher and kind of helping advocate for others. And that was how we spun it. And so no matter what you've done, like his why med essay, we really didn't have anything. So it was about karate and, teaching others and a little bit of shadowing, because that's a little bit of what he had. But, we worked with what he had and it did work out. So that's one thing I would say. It doesn't necessarily have to be super focused, but think about maybe like the things that the translatable skills or qualities that a physician needs to. It won't work for the most competitive programs perhaps, but, it worked for him. Cool. All right. Well, if you guys have any other questions, we'll keep just kind of doing the wrap-up things, but we'll definitely stop if we see any other questions. Here we go. And so if you are a senior And if you have not started on your personal statement, first off, time to start working now. You can email us, and we'll put our email down here in the chat too. And I think it's on the next slide as well. But you can sign up for a personal statement package. It's for our new clients, $199. You get a brainstorming call, you get a content and structure editing session, and then a final editing session, and then one final call to kind of talk about those finishing touches. So if you're a senior, take advantage of this, and we can get going with that. And we do have a ton of resources if you are a younger student. So you can check it out here on our website at moonprep.com/resources. Ton of resources there for you. Another
question. So this one is, aren't most BSMD programs extremely competitive? Yes, for sure. They are, there's no beating around that bush. They are definitely very competitive, but with the correct preparation, we can help equip you to stand a really good chance at admission. And as a lot of these programs are like on par with Harvard or Stanford or any of those top schools, like a chance is really the most anyone can hope for. You just have to make sure that you're prepared in the very way that you want to be.
Yeah, and how I always describe it is we've got our super reaches, our super reaches, our super reaches, super reaches, and there's no safeties. There's maybe a few within reaching point, but not very many. But most of them are going to be, just like they said, very competitive. But there definitely are tiers where there are some that are way more competitive, less than 1%, and some that are in the 5 to 7% or so, that are a little easier to get into. No safety BSMD programs.
Easier.
Yeah. And so sometimes we'll see, a new client come to us with a BSMD list and like, oh, well, I'm positive I'm going to get into this one. No, that's never ever going to happen. You might get in, but we never work with certainties for sure. But if you want to hear more about us talking about random things about college admissions, definitely check out our webinars. I think on the next page I have a list of them. Yes, some of our upcoming webinars are, oops, I'm going to hide this for a second. Some of our upcoming webinars are like, is applying early the right strategy, which might be a good webinar for a lot of our people here today to attend, because there are different ideas about what you could do, and just in general about does applying early really help get into your dream school, and that's more for our traditional undergrads. And we also have a lot of like 8-day, 9-day crash courses about scholarships, about writing an effective personal statement. So you can listen to myself talk for a couple hours, or you can listen to another counselor, Michaela, talk about scholarships for a couple hours. We do have a lot of information about all of those. And then, Nidhi, do you know off the top of your head about where does Sophie Davis, how competitive it is? I can't remember how many seats they have, because I always get with Stony Brook.
I also don't really know how many seats it has. I don't think it has more than about 15, if I'm thinking correctly, but that may be wrong.
It either has 5 or 90. I can never remember. Let me look it up real quick.
Yeah. I will say though that Sophie Davis, it comes with some stipulations to admission. Yeah. So I think you have to work in a rural or underserved area, or you have to be from a certain demographic groups, or something along those lines. So it's important that you take that into consideration. So I'd say that Sophie Davis is a solid mid-tier BSMD program.
Yeah, definitely. And it looks like it does have 90 seats, so it is one of the bigger ones for sure. Mm-hmm. But one thing too is I believe that they're more regional, and so that's the problem with a lot of these BSMD programs is they draw really heavily from their region, from their state, from their region. UMKC is a good example. They have a lot of seats, but a lot of those seats are going to Missouri students or Kansas, Illinois, Arkansas, or Oklahoma, I believe, is the last state. So you have to be touching it or in Missouri to be able to really have a fighting chance of that program. And so that's how a lot of these programs are. And so that's kind of something to consider too, is demographics definitely do matter. Okay. Let's see. And of course, here's our email. So you can either email us to take advantage of the personal statement offer, or if you want more extensive help about resume building, essay help, whatever it might be, we can help with that process. And we do just do really specialized things if it's just interview prep or things like that. We have either pay-as-you-go options, we have hourly packages, no long-term commitments. You get a refund of anything that's unused. So you can check out our page and like schedule a call with us as well if you'd like to learn more about us. Oh, I see one more question before I go to the next slide. Why is there so few seats for BSMD? That's because there's so few programs. Yeah. Yeah, it's just tough. I mean, med school in general has like 100 seats or so. Do you know how many seats have Brown's medical school in general?
Oh, for med school, I think like 150, 170. Something.
Wow. Yeah, and that's like a decent sized one. I was just making a med school like application or college list for some students, and 100, 150 is kind of the norm. And so there's just not a lot of BSM, or there are not so many medical school seats. And so they can't really give up all of their seats to BSMD students. And so that's why there's just so few seats. They will not increase. They won't probably increase for med school. It's just super competitive to get into those as well. I'll let you tackle this one if you want, Nidhi.
How important is it to visit BSMD colleges? Is virtual visit sufficient? Here, I think the key is just like to make sure you do your research about like every school. So, obviously in person for you, it might be the best, but like I feel like to a college, it really doesn't matter if you visited in person or you attended a virtual info session and took a virtual tour. But yeah, in person does help you visualize it a little bit. But
yeah. Just helpful for you to picture it. There are some schools that demonstrate interest matters, but not all. But whenever you, like for example, Hofstra's got a BAMD or BSMD program, and they have like a why Hofstra essay, and so attending those virtual information sessions can just help you get more information about the school. And then, if a child's in middle school, what they need to start from now. Honestly, at this point, I kind of tell my younger students, like, this is the time to explore some things. Try out robotics, try out science fair. Do you like NASA kind of things? What kind of things do you like? So there's no right or wrong answer. So this is, in my opinion, exploratory time. And then when you get to high school, you kind of like, okay, here's some things that I'm interested in. And maybe could start like a bigger project on that side, kind of what Nidhi was talking about with her, bigger ideas. She built on those over time, I'm assuming.
Yeah, for sure. And also like middle school is way too early to be like worrying about college, but I will say like within middle school, if there are any activities that are offered at your high school, get your feet wet, learn if you like them or not, or else you're just going to be doing that your freshman year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, let's do this last one. And I'm not sure if I completely understand it. There's 5 seats. Like, let's just say the program's 5 seats. They have 5 seats per year. And so if that's what you're asking, they won't like increase, won't go 5, 10. The number of seats itself might vary. Sometimes maybe 4 students are there, maybe 6 students are there the next year, but it'll be kind of consistent. It just depends on how many students end up accepting the offer. I don't think we have any stats on how many BSMD seats were added in the last 10 years.
There's a few like partnerships that crop up randomly every few like months or years or so, but I don't know, it, like, seems like it would be pretty stable, maybe, like, a few more BSMD seats, but pretty stable overall.
Yeah, SUNY Upstate's a good example of that, where they really cropped up a lot of partnerships, but for the most part, they're pretty consistent. Programs will come, programs will go,
Yeah,
but they're pretty
pretty
consistent.
much. I see one more question. I heard that many students in BSMDs drop out, a lot more than students in med schools. I don't necessarily know if this is true, actually. The dropout rate for most BSMDs is usually not, it's not high for sure.
Yeah. Because I mean, that's a lot of what the work goes into, is just making sure you are sure. And so, I mean, I'm sure there is some melt off, but, and probably less or probably more BSMD dropout than med school, just because they're younger and they're maybe exploring things. They just didn't even know that, these types of careers existed. But I don't have any stats either about number of BSMD students dropped off. That's a lot of what our work is too, is trying to make sure that they do know for certain that they want to be in medicine. And so having those experiences are kind of helpful.
For sure.
All right. So let's just do one more question, because then we'll have to hop off.
Yeah.
Emma wants to know, what does a day in life as a BSMD student look like?
I guess the best answer to this is honestly like the same life as like another like pre-med or any like BSMD student would look like, or any college student would look like, just less stress because I'm not worrying about the MCAT or a lot of other like small logistical things. But yeah, like I go to class, I study for the same exams. Nothing changes all that much. It's just the knowledge that the stakes aren't like as crazy high.
Stressful, yeah. Yeah. And you're integrating within the campus too. Most of the time, your peers wouldn't even know that you were in the BSMD program.
Right.
So that's the benefit. Sometimes I've heard for some BSMD programs, you are required to like do a seminar, you like get a dinner together or things like that, like all together. But it's like you're just a regular student then at that point.
For sure.
Cool. All right. Well, let me wrap up. And if anyone else, would like to work with us, like we said before, and sign up for a call.
Mhm.
And then if anything will move. Of course, we hope that you learned a lot today. Nidhi had some really great insights. And so if you did feel like you learned, we'd love for you to leave us a review. You can either do it via Google or on our website or on our Facebook, and I'll send the chat in, or I'll send the link in the chat. If you have any feedback, positive things you'd like us to improve on, or something you'd like to tell us, you can go ahead and give us an email, and we would appreciate that as well, or any like topics you'd like us to cover or whatever it might be. We really appreciate you hanging out with us for the past hour. And just one last reminder, if you do want some more kind of in-depth knowledge, we do have that BSMD book on Amazon. I guess I should have put the chat in there as well, but I didn't. I guess I can find that real quick. But if anyone, has any questions, feel free to send us emails, and we'll hopefully see you guys at the next webinar.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.